Welcome back to Campaign 2014, the House Debate on MTN and Montana PBS.
We welcome you back here to Bozeman, where we are listening to the U.S. House debate between Republican Ryan Zinke and Democrat John Lewis. I'm just going to throw out a quick question about personality. Since all we get to do is watch these ads with you guys, I want to give you guys an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself. What inspires you? What's perhaps your greatest accomplishment so far? Just get out of the facade a little bit and just tell us a little bit about Ryan Zinke.
Well, I love to fly fish. My greatest accomplishment is marrying my beautiful wife, who's here today. I love my kids and my grandkids. I'm proud of my daughter, who I told two things: don't join the Navy and don't marry a Navy SEAL, and she did both. My young sons are doing well. And what I care about? I care about working families in Montana and making sure, I'm a blue-collar kid. I grew up 3 generations of master plumbers. And what matters to me is making sure our kids have the same legacy and opportunities that I had as a kid. I had a wonderful childhood, growing up in Whitefish and born in Bozeman. I want to make sure my kids and your kids had the same experience.
Maybe you'll be able to put those plumbing skills to work back in Washington if you're successful. John.
Sure. Well,
tell us a little about your personality.
Yeah, well, my family inspires me as well. If you get off the campaign trail, you go home and do the main job. I got an 8 and a 6-year-old, and we just last night coached 2 games of soccer. My wife's the head coach. I'm the assistant. And daughter's 8 years old, and soccer's getting to that serious level. Refs, serious parents. I looked over at a game a week ago, and there were people tailgating at the game. I thought, soccer's gotten serious. But look, I want them to have what I had growing up in Montana. We're all in Montana because we want to be here. It's the way of life. It's what we have in Montana. And I worry about the future. With what's going on in Congress, going crisis to crisis to crisis. And so I'm a solution-oriented person, and that's what I want to do in Congress.
All right, let's get back to some of the issues now. Appreciate your candor there. Joe Val.
Yeah, we're going to go back to Obamacare, affordable health care. For Mr. Zinke, I got a question from a business owner in Hamilton named Paul, and he said for 25 years as a Montana business owner, he paid a lot to medical insurance over the years, really didn't get any payback. This is the first year he's had Obamacare. He says it's proven to be the first reliable health insurance of his working life, and he's worried about your campaign ad that promises to eliminate that, and he is worried what will you replace it with, and we talked about that a little bit earlier, but specifically to reassure Paul of Hamilton, is that still going to be there for him, because that's what he needs to survive and to fund his family's health care?
Well, he's one of the few, but I agree that the Obamacare does work for some. And I use the term abandon, meaning that when a ship is sinking, I think Obamacare is sinking. When a naval officer is abandoning a ship, he doesn't jump in the ocean. We make sure that you go to a safer, smaller, more stable vessel. And there's a lot of ways to make sure Montana is represented in how to do health care better. Tort reform being one of them, business pools, individual health care accounts, low-cost clinics, tax deductions. Ultimately, what we want is quality health care. We want to make sure we have access and affordability. And I think one size does not fit all. I think Montana has an aging population. We're rural. And what makes sense sometimes in Washington, D.C. or Washington doesn't make sense in Montana. And it will continue to hurt. Part of the Obamacare package hasn't even been implemented yet. Wait until we get the whole thing. And I'm concerned. There's court challenges to it. So I think the challenge to Congress is to quickly come up with a better solution, articulate it, sell it, and make sure Montana is represented.
John Lewis.
Look, when I hear abandon the ship, it's not abandon the ship, it's jump ship, because there's no plan to get people to shore. Look, we've had 50 votes in the U.S. House, over 50 votes to repeal the Affordable Care Act. To go to what? We've come back to it. Millions of uninsured. We have yet to hear a plan of what we're going to do about that, because many of those folks get health care. You can go down to emergency room at Deaconess and get the care that you need. That cost is spread around to everyone else. Higher insurance costs. higher hospital costs. And so, look, the answer is insuring more Americans, insuring those millions of Americans. Every industrialized country in this world has asked themselves the question, is health care a right? And every single one of them has answered in the affirmative except the United States. We need to continue to improve the healthcare system, not go backwards and jump ship when there's no plan to insure more Americans.
Well, Mr. Zinke, could you bullet point what specifically you think is not going right with the Affordable Health Care Act?
Well, one is the business side. I don't think whether it was an intended consequence or a consequence intended and by design, when you penalize a business for going over 50 and growing your business over 50, when you penalize employment over 30 hours, Montana, you need 40 hours in benefits. It's hard enough to make a living in Montana. And when you have a system that penalizes over 30 hours, penalizes medical innovation, you look at what's happened. What's happened to our families? When you can't get a 40-hour job because you're penalized for it, that means you're probably going to have 2 or 3 part-time jobs. That means when you have part-time jobs, one of those jobs is going to be just for making the payments for insurance. And what happens when you have erratic hours? Who's at home when the children come home? And it's affecting working families and businesses in Montana. And can we do it better? Yes, we can, John. Should we work together to do it? Absolutely.
Look, I'll tell you what's affecting working families. It's not having insurance and higher insurance costs and the high cost of health care. That's what's affecting working families in this country. And this scare tactic that businesses are going to pay this huge price just isn't true. I just read an op-ed the other day. I believe in competition in the insurance marketplace. We've got 3 companies offering insurance through the exchange. Blue Cross, Pacific Source, and the Montana Co-op, providing competition amongst each other. Companies that have over 100 employees, well, they currently may have a group plan through Blue Cross Blue Shield. Rates have been going through the roof. Here's their options. Get a new group plan through one of those other companies like the co-op, or dissolve the co-op and send individuals into the insurance market where they're going to pay less for insurance and the company is going to pay less for insurance. States that don't have competition, like Wyoming, one insurance company offering insurance on the exchange has the highest insurance rates in the country. So look, businesses in the long run are going to benefit from insuring more Americans.
But are there some areas where you could tweak it? Because that's what I hear Mr. Zinke saying, that he's saying, there's some areas that maybe we could do better here. Are there a couple of places that maybe you might make some changes?
Absolutely. Did the law fix our healthcare system? Absolutely not. Look, we need flexibility in the system, innovation. Montana, for example, we have one of the co-ops. There's 22 states that have a co-op. Let's do more of that to provide that competition. In the 22 states that have the co-op, individuals are paying 8% less on insurance rates in those 22 states. I hear from small businesses, there's too much paperwork. Let's reduce the paperwork and make it less complicated. This is a long-term problem, long-term. We're not going to solve it overnight. We need to keep doing things to make the law flexible and fix the things that aren't working.
What about, there's a woman on this panel who has a pre-existing condition. What about that? Would you do anything with that? That's one of the big parts of Obamacare that people were concerned about, to cover folks who have a pre-existing condition.
Yeah, Don, I agree on pre-existing conditions, and I've toured around Montana, and there are a lot of people that had pre-existing conditions that couldn't leave the job because if they did, they couldn't get insurance on the next job. So I agree. That's a very good part. But what happens in Obamacare in a few years when 14% is a raise in home health care? This is Montana's an aging population. What happens when Medicare payments are reduced? What happens to our urgent care facilities when we don't have the premium on Medicare? So there's a lot of issues in Montana that don't fit a model of Washington, D.C. or larger urban states. And Montana's rural. And we forget the power base of this country is on the west and east coast. And what about Montana? What about Wyoming? What about South and North Dakota? We're rural. and we have to protect our rural interests, and I think we can do it better, but there wasn't one Republican vote on Obamacare. It was done at night, and Nancy Pelosi was right. We don't know what's in it until we vote on it, you know, and until we pass it, and that's not right. And I think we can do better. And I don't view life through a red lens or a blue lens. I view life through a red, white, and blue lens, and I think we can do it better.
So just to follow up, go ahead, John.
There were no solutions there about health care. What I heard was all the problems we have in the healthcare system. I didn't hear one idea about solving the healthcare crisis we have in this country. And look, I'm somebody that's solution-oriented and is going to be focused on that if I'm fortunate enough to serve.
Janelle, let's move on to another issue.
Okay. Let's talk energy. Mr. Lewis, are you in favor of developing 2 proposed export terminals in the state of Washington to deliver Montana and Wyoming coal overseas?
Well, it's a complicated situation, number one. And for one, look, Montanans deserve and need to have markets to send our products, our commodities, whether it's coal, whether it's ag products, whatever it is. And we have a lot of congestion on the railroads today. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is this: do we want Washington, D.C. to come in and solve this decision for us, or do we need to figure out a solution between our states? Because I don't think it's fair that one state can tell our state that we can't send our commodities through that state, no matter what the commodity is. We also have commodities coming from the West Coast that travel through Montana. What if in Montana we said that can't come through Montana anymore? So this is a complicated question. And we need a solution, and I think it needs to come from Montana and Washington State so that we can get our products abroad.
Ryan Zinke.
Well, I don't think it's complicated at all. The answer is yes, we need them. And any energy plan, John, your energy plan didn't have oil and gas. And if you don't have an energy plan that supports oil, gas, and coal in Montana, it isn't an energy plan for Montana. And you can do it better. You can spend money on research and development to make clean coal, which we should. But our gas plan in this country is enormous, and we should leverage it. You know, look at the coal trains going through Missoula. Each coal train is $300,000 of revenue to Montana. 24% of the oil production tax goes to K-12. If we want new schools in Montana, which we should have, roads, highways, infrastructure, sewer system, how are we going to do it? We have to use our energy resources wisely, which we can. We don't have to take North Dakota as a model of excellence. We can do it better in Montana. But we need to develop our resources wisely, and we need to develop them now. We can be energy independent in this country for 5 years. So let's do it.
The rail lines,
No, go ahead. Yeah.
the rail lines are already crazy busy, for lack of better terms. We're already pushing through oil and coal, and we're pushing wheat off of our rail lines.
Yes, ma'am.
With these 2 export terminals increasing the coal heading to the West Coast, how are we going to handle it, and what are you going to tell communities?
Well, I did talk to Matt Rose, and he's the CEO of Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. And it is an issue that we need to build pipelines. The Keystone Pipeline is one of many. But you remember my opponent in the last debate talked about trucking. We're not going to truck oil. We need to build pipelines. And whether you sit on the left or right of global warming, every day 3.5 million barrels equivalent is flared or burned in North Dakota every day. And that's wrong to waste it. So we need to build pipelines, we need to build infrastructures so we can export Montana commodities, and we need to shore up our transportation system with a railroad to make sure, you know, the sugar beet factory in Sydney has trains going out, our wheat, and all commodities that Montana has. We need to make sure we have the rail system in order to provide product.
John?
Look, number one, it's not true that oil and gas was not in my energy plan. I called for investing in all forms of energy that we have an abundance of right here in Montana. And I heard him say, whatever you say on global warming. I think that's pretty accurate of what his position is on global warming, because here's somebody that was endorsed by the Montana conservation voters when he was running for the legislature in 2008, sent a letter to President Obama calling on him to do something about climate change, and now all of a sudden is a climate change denier and says we shouldn't invest in renewable energy. And look, which is it? Let's have consistency on this issue. And I'm calling for investing in the long-term future, not just traditional coal, oil, and gas. Sure, those support thousands of jobs, a huge part of our economy. 53% of our electricity comes from coal. But let's invest in the long-term future. And I'd like to see my opponent share those positions that he once had, but today does not.
Well, as long as we're on the subject of global warming, do you believe global warming is a human-caused event?
You know, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal recently that everyone should read. It was by a former Obama administrator, undersecretary of the Department of Energy. It has 3 points. One, is climate changing? Yes, as it always has. 2, is man an influence to that? Yes. Now, what is the influence? That's a science that's not settled. Last 16 years, there's no model that promulgates doom and gloom. In fact, the temperatures have not been rising in the last 16 years significantly. Wall Street Journal, look it up, sir. So the issue is, it's not a hoax, but it's not proven science either. But you don't dismantle America's power and energy on a maybe. It's that we need to be energy independent first. We need to do it better, which we can. But it is not a settled science. And for the president to say that Hurricane Sandy was a result of climate change is simply a false claim.
John Lewis.
Again, sign a letter to President Obama asking him to do something about climate change. A few years later, say that a volcanic explosion in the Philippines has done more to add greenhouse gases in the world than any man-made cause. And also, I read in an article a few months ago that no, it wasn't any man-caused thing. It's the rising of the ocean levels and the warming of the temperature in the climate that's causing global warming. That's what I read. He said that. Look, I want to see consistency on this issue, and above all, we need people in Congress that, regardless how you feel about it, are solution-oriented, want to be part of the solution, because the debate is not going away. And when you put your head in the sand and say it's not true, that's not helpful. Even ask coal companies. That's not helpful to the debate.
All right, we're moving along. I've got a question for both candidates. This is a question about student loans. Watched some news last night. The United States government is making billions of dollars on student loans. It's obscene. It's just unfathomable. Would you support reducing the interest rate on some of these student loans, or at least back legislation that would allow some of those student loans to be renegotiated?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would support you being able to refinance those student loans. Student loan debt has replaced credit card debt, and auto loan debt is the highest amount of debt in young people that are starting out in the world. The average Montana starts off with $27,000 in student loan debt. We need to do something about that. We need to make college more affordable through Pell Grants, and we need to let students refinance student loan debt. An irony here is that in the Ryan budget, it cuts Pell Grants. Over half of students in the university system in Montana receive Pell Grants. It cuts Pell Grants. And I heard some criticism about my debt plan, that it's not just about selling off used cars, but look, he supports the Ryan budget, the framework of the Ryan budget, but says that there's certain things in there that he doesn't like privatizing Medicare and selling off public lands. Well, that's a rounding error right there, because if you're not in favor of that, then how does the Ryan budget work?
Ryan, your response?
It's not the Ryan Zinke budget, but I do support a framework that balances the budget in 10 years. You know, back to education.
Please.
I sat on as the chairman of the Montana Senate Education Committee for a reason, because I understand the link between education and a good job. And education is an investment, it's not an expense. If the government is making money on the backs of our students that are trying to better themselves, it's wrong. And we should prosecute those for doing it. I also have the incentives, through grants. There's a lot of skills we need in America that aren't being filled. Everyone, complains about jobs going overseas because there's engineers overseas. But how about training the engineers here, so we don't have to look overseas for software development and those type of skills. So if we need a demand skill in America, it's an investment for America to make those funds available for students to fill those high demand jobs. It doesn't have to be a 4-year degree. There's welding jobs in Billings, Montana. There's welding jobs here that we need. $30 an hour, show up on time, drug-free.
Just for the record, if the United States government is making money on these student loans, Wall Street Journal, look it up, $60 billion they've made on student loans just since 2006 or 2007.
That's probably the only thing they are making money on.
Well, since I've seen it. Donna Kelly.
And I think that welding job per hour is a little higher than that from experience with a friend of mine, so that's actually a really good job. Let's do a personality question here. If you win, who will you thank? And if you lose, who will you blame?
If I win, I'm going to thank my family, and especially my wife. My wife's been through a lot. When she was a service spouse, my daughter, myself, and my son-in-law were all deployed together. That takes an enormous amount of sacrifice. Now, if we lose, I'm going to blame John Lewis.
Good answer.
John?
Well, look, if we win, I'm going to thank my family, my wife, Melissa, and my kids. It's a huge sacrifice to do this. Put yourself out there, run for public office. And my wife has been there for me through thick and thin, and I can't thank her enough. And I'm going to thank the people of Montana who have funded this campaign. We mentioned it earlier. Vast majority of the money I've raised in this race is from Montanans because I believe in what we're trying to do here. If I come up short, well, that's tough. But I know we'll give it everything we've got and maybe try harder next time.
Well, with that, our hour is mostly up, but we have both of you scheduled for a 2-minute closing statement. And we did flip a coin. John Lewis, it was decided you get to go first with the closing statement. So the next 2 minutes are yours, sir.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Jay, and I want to thank you, Ryan, for doing this again. And our panelists, Janelle, Donna, and Jill. Tonight and throughout this election, you've seen a clear choice in this race and the approaches that we would take to issues in Congress. If you want a show horse in this race, then Mr. Zinke is your guy. If you want a workhorse, then I'm your guy. I promise that if I'm fortunate enough to serve, I will spend every day working as hard as I can on Montana issues, remembering who we serve. This race comes down to who has the best vision for Montana. When it comes to public lands, we need somebody that's going to be a champion for protecting public lands and furthering access. Let's be proactive. Let's get better access. We need somebody who will be a champion for Medicare and Social Security, not support proposals that would privatize Medicare and take away benefits from seniors. And if you are a woman making a difficult health care decision, we need people in Congress who think we should let women make those decisions, not politicians. Senator Zinke is proud of his service, and I think we all owe him a debt of gratitude for that service. But we do not owe him our vote. And I respectfully ask for your vote, and I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Ryan Zinke, you have the next 2 minutes.
I'm an optimist. I think the problems facing our country can and will be fixed. And I do think the 21st century will be an American century but we have to earn it. And we do have to work together. It's just not about Republicans or Democrats. It's about Americans. And I've always viewed life as being an American first, then a Montanan, and then I'm a Republican. I don't dislike my neighbor who's a Democrat. I try to persuade you that maybe the Republican side is better, but it's not always better. You know, my voting record in the Senate was clear. I voted on the merit of the bill and not who sponsored it. And I'll do the same in Washington, D.C. I don't yield to pressure. I yield to higher principle. And I have been wrong, as we all have. And that's part of leadership, to correct your course if you're wrong, get better facts, and learn from your mistakes. You know, our president, and you may like him or may not like him, but he is our president. And today, or yesterday, at Northwest University, in Kellogg School of Business, he made a couple remarks that are interesting. He said, well, while I'm not running for office, make no mistake, my policies are on the ballot. Every one of them. And what that means is this election is about whether you think the policies of Barack Hussein Obama are correct. It is. I don't believe they are correct. And I'll stand on a better vision, and I'll stand on a better legacy given to my children of freedom, of liberty, and making sure we earn it. So a vote for my opponent is a vote for the policies of this president. And if you agree with them, great. If you don't, I'm going to ask for your vote. Thank you. God bless America, and God bless all those who defend her. Good night.
Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you for all here in the audience and your attention tonight. Also, for those of you watching on Montana PBS, we invite you to stay tuned. In the next half hour, we'll be joining our panel along with political science professor David Parker from MSU as we analyze this debate. And so that's going to come up on Montana PBS immediately following. But for right now, we want to thank you for joining us here on the Montana Television Network. Don't forget, those absentee ballots will be arriving in a mailbox soon near you starting Monday. So now it's up to the voters to decide. And I hope you enjoyed our debate tonight. Also, just a quick reminder, our PBS special will also be replayed tomorrow morning on Face the State on the Montana Television Network that airs at 9:30 in the morning. Until then, we'd like to thank our panel. I'd like to thank John Lewis and Ryan Zinke in your campaigns. Thank you, sir. That's it from Bozeman.
Thanks to support from the Greater Montana Foundation. The Greater Montana Foundation, founded by Montana broadcasting pioneer Ed Craney, supports communications on issues, trends, and values of importance to all Montanans.